Hello out there, all you beautiful internet people. This is Nick Cicada, pro movie reviewer, back at it again, talking to you straight from movie land. It's finally time to review one of the most anticipated cinematic events of the year, director Denis Villeneuve's new movie, Dune Part 2, the second part in the Dune saga, which adapts the second half of Frank Herbert's iconic science fiction novel, Dune. Let's get right into the movie. So, for a little background, it's wild to believe that it's already been 2 years since Dune Part 1 came out, because I remember seeing that in theaters and really liking it. My experience with Dune goes as follows. I watched the original Dune, the David Lynch one from 1984, when I was really young, probably like 12, and I remember really loving the shit out of it. Everything about it was so much fun. I was like, this is a cool as fuck story. And I didn't understand what it was about at the time. I just saw like Patrick Stewart and Kyle MacLachlan and Virginia Madsen, and all their cool, colorful, outrageous get-up, and I was just like, yeah, this is the franchise for me. But then I saw Dune Part 1. It was one of the first movies I saw coming out of COVID, and I was really excited for this cinematic event. And also I was very disillusioned with Star Trek and Star Wars, and I was ready for a new sci-fi franchise to come along. I was ready for some awesome new spacefaring spectacle, because I felt like the 2010s had kind of been a dry spell for science fiction. So I saw Dune Part 1. Then I made the mistake of reading the Dune book between these two new Dune movies. And this was a mistake, as I say, because reading the Dune book, and this is the case with any adaptation of a book, you're always just going to prefer the book. Once you've read the book, you'll be like, oh, this is why the movie works, because it's based on this book. And everything I like about the movie really originated in the book. I didn't realize this, of course, when I watched the first Dune movie, but it really dawned on me watching the second part of the Dune story just how much Denis Villeneuve had to cut out to make it a feasible runtime. I don't think that's the only reason I enjoyed the first Dune movie. I'm pretty sure it was a more accurate adaptation of the first half of Dune. If I just remember it, I don't think I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses or anything. I think it was a more accurate adaptation. It did cut out about as much stuff as Dune Part 2 does, but it was more true and faithful to the book, and I think that was its main advantage. So, I do have a lot to complain about with Dune Part 2, and if you were expecting a positive, cheery review, then now's your time to say farewell to this video and go watch fucking Chris Stuckman or one of those sellout types, because I don't mess around on here. So, before I go into what I dislike about Dune Part 2, I guess I should run down the positives. My main complaint with Dune Part 1 was that a lot of the CGI looked fake, a lot of the desert shots especially looked really lame, the worms looked really lame, but Denis Villeneuve probably got a lot of comments like that, so he kind of addressed it. In this movie, a lot of the background shots of the desert are more blurry, so they don't have to like really show it, and whenever the characters are interacting with sand, you can tell it's real sand. They don't use so much fake sand this time around. Also, the scene where Paul rides the worm for the first time, they get like some kind of material to be like worm skin, and they put it under Timothée Chalamet, so that's kind of cool. It's more so a blend of practical and CGI this time around, and they don't really like use CGI as a crutch. The kangaroo mouse still looks really lame, like the actual Muad'Dib. It just looks so fake. But aside from that, they have fixed a lot of the CGI, and in fact, one of my favorite scenes is the scene with the spice harvester this time around. Even though I know it's CGI, it's cool how they have to like crawl under it and use the arms strategically and like blow the ornithopter out of the sky. That's kind of a cool scene actually, and actually makes use of a spice harvester in a pretty cool new way. And if I'm remembering correctly, that part wasn't in the book. So Denis Villeneuve actually kind of invented that. So that's pretty cool. That's a good scene. As far as actors I really like Javier Bardem as Stilgar, and I really like Josh Brolin as Gurney Halleck, and I really like the Baron. The Baron is still great, still one of the greatest antagonists of all time. I just can't bring myself to say that there's anything less than perfection about the Baron and Beast Raban and Fade Rautha. They really are fantastic antagonists, the Harkonnens. They're such vile bastards. And I thought that the absence of Piter de Vries would leave kind of a gap, but no, I mean, Fade Rautha is fantastic. His introduction is awesome. He's like a fucking vampire, and in here you see some of the Harkonnen debauchery. You get to see like the prostitutes and the concubines and all, and how they just like dispose them and then stick their tongue out, and it's really vile, but it's also really fun and very, very accurate to the source material. So I like how Denis Villeneuve isn't afraid to, like, you know, show this absolute degeneracy that the Harkonnens get up to, and really, really make you hate Fade Rautha. He's such a vile piece of shit. Like I said, I really like Javier Bardem as Stilgar. He's excellent. Every scene he's in, you can tell he's having a lot of fun. Now I think about it, him and Josh Brolin is kind of a No Country for Old Men reunion too, so that's nice. Both great actors, obviously. I respect both of them, and they're a lot of fun to watch in this. The last good thing that I noticed is the first scene where it's all orange and like one of Arrakis' moons is eclipsing. Really cool color palette on that. Also, the Sardaukar look really menacing, and I like that. And all the fights with the Sardaukar are very well choreographed. The action's really tight and concise, and you can tell they had a lot of training. So if you go into this for the fight scenes, you won't be disappointed. The action is really, really awesome. They stab it up, they fight it up. It's really cool and very admirable. You don't see too many really well choreographed action scenes these days, but Dune seriously delivers on that, and the Sardaukar really do come across like an intimidating presence. Okay, so now it's time to talk about what I don't like. Like I said, I don't like how a lot of the important scenes from the book are cut out for the movie. Now I noticed this with Dune Part 1. Not only is the scene at dinner cut out, where Duke Atreides does away with the old custom of giving the spoils of the dish rags to, but also the greenhouse scene where Lady Jessica finds the big fancy greenhouse and Lady Finring's signature is on the underside of the palm leaf or whatever. And I feel like both those scenes are really important to the book and what Frank Herbert was going for. And I feel like cutting them out was a huge mistake because like the first scene makes you feel suspicious and like paranoid about everyone around the Atreides family and like who's conspiring to assassinate them, and would be really cool to see in movie form. And the greenhouse scene is necessary to establish the characters of Count and Lady Finring, and also how they're kind of helping the Atreides survive, all while the Harkonnens are plotting against them. The Finrings are kind of on their side. So both important scenes, and I did notice their absence when I read the Dune book. After watching Dune Part 1, I was like, well, yeah, that is kind of lame how Denis Villeneuve just cut out these two very important scenes. So for this movie, not only is vital material cut out, but important points in the plot that just like make sense and are necessary for the plot to proceed are substantially altered in a way that makes the plot going forward, I think, like completely unworkable. So, for instance, the first scene is Lady Jessica undergoing the Water of Life ceremony, and I went into this and I was like, wow, this is really awesome. This is really cool, because there's this old Fremen crone, you know, the Reverend Mother, and she makes this creepy smile like, eh, and she's feeding Jessica the Water of Life, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is creepy, this is intense, wow, it's just like the book. And you see Aaliyah in the womb and all this, and, you know, it's cool. And you think, oh damn, you know, Aaliyah's going to be born, and she's going to become the abomination, and she's going to have all the consciousness of all the Reverend Mothers previously inside her, and it's going to be really interesting to see how Denis Villeneuve tackles this incredibly neat concept, like this girl with thousands of consciousnesses in her mind, cinematically. That'll be really cool to see adapted. But Aaliyah isn't in this movie. Aaliyah doesn't get born in this movie, which I think is just like flat out stupid. So the amount of time that Paul and Jessica spend with the Fremen in this movie, from the point where they arrive at Siege Tabor to the point where they lay siege to the shield wall and the Emperor's compound, has to be less than 9 months, because by the end Aaliyah still isn't born. And assuming that the term of pregnancy for a Reverend Mother is about the same as in our universe, 9 months, one would assume, oh, Paul's only been with the Fremen like 7-8 months. And it's like, in that amount of time he's accepted as one of them and into the fold, and he's able to get all of them to rise up. Because in the book, at the end, Aaliyah's like 3-4 years old. She's like a toddler. So you assume that Paul's been with the Fremen for a couple of years and had time to spread the word and get his name out as this shadowy leader, that people want to follow. In the movie, it's so rushed that Aaliyah isn't even born by the end. And that's a huge mistake. You want to have these characters age up by a couple years so that you feel like time has actually progressed and it's actually been a while since the Duke's death and the Harkonnen takeover and all that. No time to breathe with this. And I get that, you have to cut stuff out for a movie, but it rushes forward so fast that important points are missed, and an entire character isn't even fucking born, who by the end of the book is already alive and able to talk and everything. And it just feels like a huge missed opportunity and a massive waste, and it's just moving too fast. And while I fully acknowledge that, the David Lynch version in 1984 couldn't really tackle the book in one movie, heck, I don't even think necessarily Dune can be tackled in 2 movies. There's so much going on and so much cool shit to explore. So after Jessica undergoes the Water of Life ceremony, the movie does this really weird thing where it makes her scary, and it adds this stupid filter onto her voice, and it pretends like she's crazy, even though that's not the case in the book. In the book, and I've heard from a lot of readers who happen to be single mothers and are very glad to see a positive representation of that type of character in fiction, because there aren't too many single mother characters in literature, and Jessica is one of the few really strong female characters in sci-fi in particular, who basically raises her son on her own in extremely hostile conditions, in a basically deadly environment. Lots of people love her. She's a fan favorite. I've heard from so many Dune readers who are like, oh man, Lady Jessica's awesome. I don't even really like Dune Messiah because there's not enough Jessica in it. Jessica's cool. She's a cool fucking character, She raises Paul and Aaliyah, and she's just an awesome character, She's cool. But then in the movie, it treats her like she's bad or something for undergoing the Water of Life ceremony while she's pregnant, or she's scary or something. It's she's not scary, she's just Paul's mom, and she's undergone this traumatic, horrible experience for both of them that they weren't ready for, and now Aaliyah's screwed too, and it's you feel bad for her in the book, but in the movie it tries and makes her out to be this villain for using the Missionara Predictiva on Arrakis and manipulating the Fremen. But if anyone's the villain there, it's not Jessica, because she's just born into this type culture and this type manipulation and stuff. It's Gaius Helen Mahayam, because she's the mastermind behind all this shit. She irresponsibly tried to bring the Kwisatz Haderach into existence. She's the vile bitch, Why attack Lady Jessica? She's cool in the book, and everyone likes her and kind of is chill with her. And one of the coolest things in the book is the bond that forms between Chani and Jessica, and that both of them had to be concubines basically to their husband. They couldn't be formally, called wives, so they're able to kind of bond and connect over that both of them had to be arranged in these sham marriages and serve as concubines, even though the love they feel for their guys is very intense and strong. And, you know, they're pals in the book, and that's like awesome and cool that Chani and Jessica like have so much in common. And in this movie, Chani sucks. I don't know how better to put it, but they ruined Chani so bad. So I should explain before going further that Timothée Chalamet really can't act, and I don't really like his acting. And I like the first one because Oscar Isaac was awesome as the Duke, and Jason Momoa was in it, and both of them really carried a lot of the scenes. And Timothée Chalamet, you know, he didn't have so many lines because he's just there to be carried around from set piece to set piece. Timothée Chalamet cannot act in a leading role. He's very annoying. His voice is all whiny. His method is like doofy. And then you got Zendaya, and Zendaya is even arguably worse. Like, she really, really cannot act. There are these scenes, and it's not necessarily Timothée Chalamet's fault, but there's these scenes where Denis Villeneuve has written in this dialogue that sounds like really clunky and wrong. Like, Paul says, "Hey, what you guys talking about?" And it's so weird to hear a character in the fucking Dune franchise say, "you guys." Like, it's so modern and contemporary, and everyone around is talking in like this neo-medieval speech, and then Timothée Chalamet is just like, "Hey, what you guys talking about?" And it's like, you're just pulled out of the movie completely. Your suspension of disbelief is totally broken, because nobody in the Dune universe would say that. Like I said, Zendaya really can't act, and you know, it's a shame, because I was looking forward that maybe like Dune 2 would expand their acting a little bit, and they kind of grow as actors, but everything I've seen Timothée and Zendaya in, I just really don't like. Like, aside from Timothy's appearances on SNL, which are kind of fun, like Tiny Horse and shit. But, you know, that's little bursts of Timothée. I really don't think he can carry a movie on his own. And it just makes me wish for Kyle MacLachlan, because Kyle MacLachlan, you know, he was a cool-ass Paul Atreides. He was a good fucking lead. He could act, you know. Fucking Dale Cooper. I like Kyle MacLachlan a lot. And, you know, just to think that a lot of people will no longer see Kyle MacLachlan as the true Paul Atreides, that's a shame. Because I think he's a much better Paul Atreides, because he can carry a fucking movie. So, they make Chani suck. The whole movie, Chani, like, the first part, she's basically how she is in the book. She's, like, cool and, you know, in love with Paul, and they, like, talk a lot, and, you know, you're like, oh, Chani, yeah, I like Chani. And then the second part, she becomes, like, insane and tries to stop the Fremen from pushing back against the Harkonnens. And she's like, "Oh, Paul, you piece of shit. Oh, you're becoming a tyrant." And it's like Denis Villeneuve has never learned show, don't tell. And, like, you don't have characters explain to the camera directly that Paul's becoming a tyrant. You like, just show it. And they do show it. And it's, like, really obvious that Paul is giving in to these manipulative tendencies that he's been endowed with as the Kwisatz Haderach. But you don't, like, tell that with fucking Chani. She just, like, bursts out. There's this point where she's like, "Oh, I fight for the Fremen, but not for you, Paul, because you're trying to enslave us." And it's like, I said this in my last Dune review, that, like, Dune is good because, unlike Star Wars, it has a lot more morally gray characters who aren't just, like, black and white. And, like, the Atreides are technically also manipulative. But all things considered, comparatively, they are better than the Harkonnens. Like, the Harkonnens literally want to genocide the Fremen out of existence. So the fact that Chani can't just be, like, a little more of a team player here is like, "Oh, I'm fighting for the Fremen, but not for you." And it's like, but you are fighting, so you are fighting for Paul, and he will become the Emperor if you fight. Like, it'd be cool if Denis Villeneuve really went off the deep end and made a decision that nobody saw coming, like, oh, Chani joins the Harkonnens, or Chani just fucks off into the desert before the fighting even starts. But she's in this weird position where she's fighting, but, like, she hates Paul the whole time, so it's like, what the fuck are you here for if you're just going to be annoying and just, like, make the movie suck and just talk about how Paul is, like, using the missionary productive to his own ends, which maybe he's doing, but you don't need to fucking explain that, and it just ruins the character, because, like, she used to be cool and awesome in the book, and she was a badass, you know, she could hold her own in the book, and she, like, fought a bunch of fucking Harkonnens and shit. She was an awesome, strong female character that was great. And in the movie, she just like sucks, and Zendaya makes this pouty face the whole time, like, and just like gets pissy and acts up, and it's just like completely insufferable. Especially when you make like Jessica evil or whatever, which is not in the book at all, and just like ruins the character. There's no reason to paint her as the bad guy here. I mean, technically, yeah, her and Paul are both kind of morally bankrupt, but as the book explains, there's a very thin path that Paul has to walk. Like, if he doesn't become the Emperor of the Universe, if he doesn't defeat the Harkonnens and start the Jihad, the Fremen will just be wiped out, and the Harkonnens will just control everything, which, all things considered, isn't really a desirable outcome either, so you gotta do something. That's one of the great moral conundrums of Dune. And I just find it so weird, because I think what Denis Villeneuve was trying to do here is to like give Chani more agency and make her more of a character and like less of just a subservient concubine like in the book, which, you know, I would kind of understand, but it doesn't make any sense when you reduce the role of so many other like really strong, cool, impactful female characters from the book, like Jessica and Aaliyah, who isn't even born yet in this, but in the book is like really awesome and cool, and Princess Irulan. I don't really like the new updated Princess Irulan. She barely does anything, and she doesn't have nearly the presence of Virginia Madsen, and she doesn't even really like narrate the movie. Like, she should have been narrating both movies, because that's the role she serves in the book and the David Lynch film, is like as the omnipresent narrator of everything. In this movie, she just like records things on this like metal device and kind of monologues, and she doesn't have nearly the presence of Virginia Madsen. And also, Denis Villeneuve turned Liette Kynes into a girl in the first movie, but then she just dies at the end of it and sacrifices herself into worm instead of the awesome scene where she goes out and like meets her dad, or in the book, you know, his dad. But I don't know why you changed Liette Kynes into a woman just to like kill her off. You could have kept her till the second movie and had that awesome scene where, you know, it like starves in the desert, because that's the central pivotal theme of Dune. That's ultimately what it's about, is the ecology. Liette Kynes is the character insert of Frank Herbert, like the neutral party who's not invested in these political squabbles but is just interested in the act of terraforming. And I feel like that's such a waste, and you could have gotten so much more out of Liette Kynes. Like, I don't mind that you gender swapped Liette Kynes, but you could have at least done more with her. Like, for fuck's sake, an interesting character gone to waste there. And the same has to be said for Lady Finring. I was really looking forward to the Lady Finring part, because Lady Finring is one of my favorite characters in the whole book, her and Count Finring. This movie cuts Count Finring out altogether. He's not even mentioned, so he doesn't even exist, I guess, in this continuity, even though in the book they're like a power couple and they're like scheming and devious against Feyd-Rautha and Gaiety Prime, and it's awesome. And it's just Lady Finring, and she doesn't get nearly enough screen time, and I was really looking forward to it, but it's just this really cheesy scene where she holds up the Gom Jabbar to Feyd-Rautha. And I get that in the book she seduces him too, and maybe there's not a way to make that cinematically appealing, the seduction of Feyd-Rautha, because he's really gross and corny, and it'll just come off as gross and corny when she's like, "Ooh, don't you want some of this?" And Feyd-Rautha is like, "Oh, I do want some." It's kind of dumb. And then there's no Count Finring, so it's like, what the fuck happened to Count Finring? Lady Finring's just like single now? Like, I don't mind the actress so much, but again, just a complete waste of a character who I feel like if she was established in Dune Part 1 with the greenhouse scene, then people would know who she is. But if you haven't read the book and you walk into Dune Part 2, you'll be so confused, like, who's this lady? Who's Finring? I don't even know, because she wasn't in Dune Part 1. And I feel like not enough characters carry over from Dune Part 1 into Part 2 and vice versa, who are in both parts in the book. Probably the prime example of this is Thufir Hawat, who is in a lot of the second part of the book, and I realized like halfway through the movie, oh my gosh, Chani is just going to cut out all of Thufir Hawat, and there's not going to be any Thufir Hawat in this movie, even though those are some of the best scenes, hands down, in the second part of the book, because Thufir Hawat is effectively brainwashed into thinking that Jessica killed the Duke, and the Baron is such a conniving, manipulative piece of shit that he's able to brainwash the Atreides Mentat and turn him into his new Mentat. And Thufir Wat thinks that Jessica is a murderer the whole time. So not only has Jessica undergone this traumatic experience of giving birth with the water of life, and Aaliyah comes out as an abomination, but also she's suspected of murder by like everyone who's left from the Atreides house, which is not touched upon at all in this film, because they want to paint Jessica as like this horrible, evil, conniving demon or something, which is so misogynistic and weird. But the other thing is, like, if Thufir Wat doesn't still exist in this continuity, which it doesn't even explain what happened to him, because he doesn't die in the first movie, like what the fuck happened to him? Do the Harkonnens just not function without a Mentat now that Piter is gone? Like, you mean to tell me seriously that this house that's composed of, like, fucking oafish brutes functions without a Mentat? Like, they don't need a human computer to scheme all their strategies and stuff? It's just the Baron? I get that the Baron is kind of manipulative, but I really don't think he can, like, strategize just with him and Feyd-Rautha and Rabban. I think they need a fucking Mentat. So to cut Thufir Hawat out, and Gurney Halleck comes back, but also, like, there's no fighting. There's not the scene where he sees Jessica and he's like, oh my gosh, he murdered the Duke, I've got to take her out. And Paul has to, like, use his serious manipulation powers. He has to basically use the voice on Gurney to convince him, no, Gurney, Jessica didn't kill the Duke, it was the Baron. It's the Baron the whole time, it's not Jessica. And that's one of the best scenes from the second part of Dune, but it's just totally cut out. And Gurney Halleck is basically, he just joins the ranks and he's just like, oh yeah, Paul, great. Yeah, no conflict here. Like, there's no inner conflict between Gurney and Jessica, but then there's conflict, this contrived bullshit conflict between Chani and Jessica, which is totally the wrong move, and just goes to show that, like, this movie weirdly hates Jessica and wants to make Chani like this, like, martyr or something. It's fucking weird. It serves zero narrative purpose. It ruins the movie. Every scene that Chani is in just fucking sucks. So by the end of the movie, Chani just makes her pouty face, and then just storms out into the desert on a fucking worm, and then that's the last we see of her. And I heard that Denis Villeneuve is going to adapt Dune Messiah, but I don't even know how he could adapt Dune Messiah. I was really glad he was going to adapt Dune Messiah, because, like, it's an important conclusion to the first Dune book, you know, to show the fall of Paul and how he, like, loses his grip on things and walks out into the desert and gets blind and all that. But I don't even know how it's going to work now that there's not the dynamic between Chani and Irulan that exists in Dune Messiah, and Aaliyah hasn't even been introduced. And again, trying to make Chani like a stronger female character than she is in the book, but also removing Aaliyah completely, who, like, in the book, the Gom Jabbar is reintroduced, not in the scene with Feyd-Rautha, but it's literally the device used to kill the Baron, and Aaliyah does it, and she's like 4, and that's one of the coolest parts of the book. And if that's not, like, female empowerment, you know, this 4-year-old character killing, like, literally the central antagonist of the book, like, resolving the conflict when she's 4, like, I don't know what you do call female empowerment. That's the most awesome part of the first Dune book, and Leah's so cool for doing that. And in the movie, it's just Paul, and he just, like, stabs the Baron, not with the Gom Jabbar, but with just, like, a normal knife. And it's so boring, and, like, it doesn't feel like a fitting into the Baron's character at all. You know, the point is that, like, he has this hubris, and he never imagined he'd get taken down by a 4-year-old girl. But, you know, when Paul does it, it's like, you know, it's, like, so fucking boring. That part just totally doesn't do it for me. Taking Aaliyah out of the narrative is a huge mistake. The actress who plays her in the dream sequence is cool, and I'm sure she could play Aaliyah great if she was in the fucking movie, but it just deletes Aaliyah for no fucking reason. And again, the time continuity suggests that he's only been at the Fremen for like 8 months at the most, which is just, like, stupid. So then there's the final fight with Feyd-Rautha, which, all things considered, is pretty cool. Like, the choreography's great. Again, wonderful choreography. Feyd-Rautha's awesome. I love how they say, oh, we're technically cousins because we're both Harkonnens, even though in the book that scene, that exchange of dialogue between Paul and Jessica isn't to be like, oh, we need to become the Harkonnens, we're just racist. That's kind of the point in the book, is that they're like irrationally racist towards the Harkonnens. It makes no sense because they have Harkonnen ancestry. Whereas in the movie, Paul's like, oh, we need to become Harkonnens. Again, show don't tell. It's too blunt. It's too on the nose. It can be just suggested that Paul has some sinister things welling up in his mind because he's part Harkonnen. You don't need to say, like, oh, we'll become like the Harkonnens. Like, what does that even mean? So anyway, Feyd-Rautha and Paul fight it out. It's pretty cool, but, you know, Chani's in the background making her pouty face the whole time. So you can't even really enjoy this awesome fight between Paul and Feyd-Rautha, because, like, it's just totally undermined by Zendaya's presence. Like, again, she sucks so much in this movie. It's just like every scene with her is just, like, completely ruined, and you can't take seriously. Her dialogue is delivered so fucking hammy. The movie just ends with Chani going out into the desert on a worm, so I don't even know how Dune Messiah is going to happen anymore, because, like, how are you going to do that? Like, the dynamic is completely different. She doesn't even know Irulan. She hates Jessica, and she doesn't even like Paul. She hates Paul. So, like, how are you going to do a fucking Dune Messiah adaptation now? I don't even know what that's going to look like, and I don't think it's going to be very good, and I'm probably not going to go to watch it when it comes out. I might just to see how bad it is, but I was expecting Dune 2 to be good, because I thought it would just be an accurate, faithful adaptation of the book, albeit maybe with some scenes cut out like the first one, but instead it decides to go this whole different stupid route with Chani, and it just doesn't fucking work, because, like, the characters in Dune do what they do for very specific reasons that Frank Herbert clearly, like, understood, and here Denis Villeneuve is just changing shit for no reason. I think the main problem is there's a double standard applied by Dune fans to the David Lynch movie versus the Denis Villeneuve movie. And if there's one thing I really hate and can't stand, it's a double standard. They're like, oh, in the Dune movie by David Lynch, oh, they changed the weirding way to weirding modules, and that's not in the book, and oh, it's such a big change. And it's like, well, yeah, but, like, Denis Villeneuve cuts out entire fucking scenes that are awesome and necessary for the plot to move forward, and just, like, rushes everything, and then adds in shit that didn't need to be there, and actually, like, actively ruins the plot. And then the Dune nerds, the Dune purists are like, oh, but in the first one, Paul makes it rain on Arrakis at the end, whereas that would actually kill the worms. And it's like, if you consider that maybe that's a symbolic moment, and maybe it does kill the worms, and maybe that becomes a problem, you know, maybe that's indicative of Paul's eventual collapse. Maybe the rain isn't literal. Maybe you're stupid for taking a movie that literally, and then giving Denis Villeneuve all the free passes to, you know, just make this franchise boring and desaturated. And the more I look at his movies, I realize, like, his movies they look bland. Like, the color palette's boring. Aside from the first scene with, like, the eclipse, the colors are, like, really flat. It's just not fun anymore. And if I think of, like, Dune 84, I'm thinking, like, fun, you know? Sting is in it, Patrick Stewart's in it, all the outrageous costumes, the fun-looking shit, you know, the Atreides garb. Oh my gosh, it's fun. When Kenneth McMillan as the fucking Baron becomes a big floaty balloon and he pops his nipples and shit, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a fun movie. And Princess Irulan's awesome. The narration she gives at the beginning, the spice is vital. And now Dune just is, like, boring and sucks, and it's just, like, lame, and it's full of this, like, boring soundtrack, and the dialogue's all corny, and it's just delivered totally wrong. And people apply a completely different standard to it, and I think that sucks. And I think Dune needs to be fun again. And I'm bored now. I'm bored with it. Maybe it's just that it got old, or maybe it's that it always sucked, but I thought the first one was pretty good for all that's worth. I thought it was, like, okay. But now the second one just, like, it just sucks. It's already getting tired. I really don't think this is going to become, like, a big prolonged franchise. I think it's going to crash and burn, which is sad to see that Hollywood still can't pull off a decent, like, long-term franchise that like keeps it going, because again, Dune has like 6 sequels, so you could make a pretty damn good franchise out of it. But if it's just gonna go to Dune Messiah and then just like fizzle out and piss off, you know, okay, I don't really mind. I think it's really funny and even a little bit ironic that, you know, Dune warns against the charisma of strong leaders, and here comes along Denis Villeneuve, you know, the hot new talent on the block, and he promises, oh, I'm gonna make Dune great, I'm gonna do it honor to all the fans, and then he just makes like this really like lame adaptation that doesn't live up. Like I do still feel like the first part lived up, but the second part, it's just missing something. It's missing this like vital spark that is necessary to Dune. Like self-awareness, maybe that's it. Dune is a very self-aware fucking franchise. Like Frank Herbert was obviously very self-aware. I don't think Denis Villeneuve really has that element of self-awareness. Hence why like all the dialogue is so cheesy and shit. And it just feels like robbed. It feels like less than somehow. Like there's a point where Paul literally like does a big voice thing, ooh, at a Reverend Mother Mahayam, and she's like, abomination. And it's like, no, he's not the abomination. Ali is the abomination. She's called the abomination because her pregnancy was fucked up, and that's why she's called the abomination. Like, you're just using terminology from the books without, like, understanding what it even is supposed to mean. It's just window dressing at this point. And it just feels like so hollow. There's a point where like Lady Finring is like, plans within plans, and it's like, no, the line is fight within fight, or faint within faint, or however you pronounce that word, but it's not fucking plans within plans. It just sounds so dry and basic. I'm surprised they didn't reduce the litany against fear to like, you know, some basic ass 21st century slang or some plans within plans. Just say fight within fight, because it sounds fucking cooler, and Frank Herbert knew that. He knew how to write dialogue. Two other things I do like about the movie, I guess I should mention. The shot on Giedi Prime is cool. I like how it's in black and white. I like how there's ink effects in the sky, which kind of call back to Denis Villeneuve's movie Arrival, which I actually did like. And the ink shots in Giedi Prime kind of call back to that, and I think Denis Villeneuve's kind of good with those effects. And I really do like the idea that Giedi Prime is like black and white and like colorless, and it's like a world of vampires. I did like Giedi Prime a lot more as a smog-filled industrial green wasteland like in the David Lynch version. But I respect this interpretation too. I think it's new. I think it's interesting. The Colosseum fight is awesome, and Fade Rauth is such a conniving presence, and it's so cool. The bit with the gladiator who's like the last of the Atreides house, and he isn't drugged, and he almost gets the slip on Fade Rauth, but ultimately doesn't. You know, it's a points like that where Denis actually just like adapting the source material accurately. That's awesome. Like, that scene is great. But then, like I said, the one immediately afterward, Lady Finring seduces Fade Rauth with the Gom Jabbar is just like dumb. And I guess they felt like they had to reintroduce the Gom Jabbar because that was the most iconic scene from the first movie. But you know how you reintroduce that? Fucking Aaliyah stabs the Baron with it. That's how it's reintroduced in the book. So they should have just gone with that and just like done an accurate adaptation of the fucking book, because that's what I paid to watch. And then the other thing is, I like Christopher Walken as the Emperor. He's one of those actors, kind of like Steve Buscemi or whatever, where whatever he's in, he makes it awesome and cool and just better by his presence. So I really did like him. You'd think he's kind of goofy, but he really tries to kind of hide his accent and give a memorable, dramatic performance here as Shaddam, the Emperor of the Known Universe. And it's pretty cool, because if you think about it, in the Fatboy Slim Weapon of Choice music video, which is one of the things he's most well known for, there's the line, walk without rhythm and you want to track the worm, which is a reference to Dune. I don't know if Denis Villeneuve chose him specifically for that, but it is kind of awesome that it's come full circle, and now he's literally in Dune, and he's in the music video for a song that famously references Dune. I think that's kind of cool, and shows like a kind of a fun little Easter egg, if that is the intent, which I don't know if it is, but it's pretty neat if you think about it. But other than that, aside from like Christopher Walken and Josh Brolin, Javier Bardem, obviously all the actors you know are going to be good. The acting is pretty shit. And I can't stand Paul, I can't stand Chani. They're really annoying the whole time. It feels like really empty. And yeah, Paul and Chani are the worst parts of this movie, and that's like sad considering they're the two leading characters. And I was looking forward to maybe seeing Timothée Chalamet or Zendaya grow as actors and like, you know, become like better at what they do, but dialogue is so shit. It's so dumb and hammy and cheesy, and I can't stand the scenes where they're in love, and I can't stand the scenes where they're fucking fighting. It's so fucking insipid the whole time. So, what do I rate Dune Part 2? Well, I would have to rate it like 7 out of 10. It's really cool, and the worms and the action is neat. And if you haven't read the book, fuck, you might like it. But I would recommend this for Dune fans, just like to go in and see how it fares for you, whether you can excuse all the changes that were made from book to movie, whether you can really jive with it, whether you can handle it, and just like even if you can't, to view it in context, because it's interesting. It's interesting to see the cultural phenomenon of Dune take off and like become something from obscurity. You know, it's interesting that this is like the new like big Gen Z franchise that everyone likes now, and everyone can like recite the catchphrases of it. It's really fucking interesting to hear like, you know, the spice is vital become like a pop cultural touchstone. It's interesting, but I just think it's done in a really sad, underwhelming type way that, you know, it's just like, what was even happening here? How do we get to this point? So, editing Nick here, I just got back from watching Dune Part 2 a second time because I figured I should really let my feelings simmer on it, and luckily it's still in theaters at this point. So, I just figured I should say, like, after watching it a second time, I do have to raise my initial score of it by half a point, because Christopher Walken is trying so hard, and Josh Brolin and Javier Bardem, and they're such good actors, and they really give their all to this movie. Like I say, like, the special effects are good. It looks okay, except for like the part with the CGI mouse. That looks really attacked. The worms look way better than I figured they would, and the bit with the spaceship at the end is cool. A big metallic orb. It looks nice, you know. It's a very pretty looking, fun, spectacle type of movie. So, you know, I'll give it that. And I didn't notice Chani so much this time. I kind of just ignored that and just like focused on the bit where Gurney Halleck, you know, stabs the Beast Raban in the throat, and it's like, this is for my Duke and my friends, and you know, it's awesome because you're supposed to focus on that. Dune only functions effectively if you end Dune believing that Paul is the good guy and that he's won, and you're on his side, and then you go into Dune Messiah and everything is toppled and Paul becomes a tragic figure and all of that. But that's not supposed to happen until Dune Messiah is really the point. You know, there can be like subtle foreshadowing, I guess, is what I mean to say. But this movie doesn't have subtlety. There's no subtlety to it. It stripped all the subtlety out. What makes Dune better than Star Wars, right, is that Star Wars is morally reductive. It is set in a galaxy where there's the dark side and the light side. And on the one side, you got Darth Vader and Palpatine. On the other side, you got Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan. But the great thing about Dune, and the reason it's better than Star Wars, I love Star Wars, but the reason Dune is better than Star Wars is because it's morally complex. Every character is gray. Technically, even the Harkonnens are sort of gray. And you don't like Paul, you don't really like Princess Irulan or any of them, but some of them, comparatively, are more likable than others. The characters are all gray, right, but they exist on this extremely detailed and elaborate spectrum. In other words, there is subtlety to these characters, and that's the point of Dune, is that everyone is constantly backstabbing each other, vying for power. That's just the way the universe is, and that's the way the human species is. But ultimately what Frank Herbert, I think, is saying about
about all of that is that that is the beauty of the human species, the innate beauty of the human species. Yeah, it's complicated. And that's the point, is the complexity of the human species and like the human mindset and outlook and everything. And this just totally reduces all that. Denis Villeneuve might think by making Chani like the mouthpiece for what the audience is thinking, like, oh, Paul's becoming so evil. Oh, he probably thinks, wow, you know, this adds more conflict to this makes it more layered, more complex. Suddenly these characters are even deeper now because there's more infighting between the good guys, you know. But actually, all it does is it feels like I'm being told as a viewer what to think, instead of, you know, the book, or for that matter, the original David Lynch version, where for the most part you're just kind of, you know, supposed to look at this alien future and decide for yourself which characters you defend the actions of, which ones you don't. You're allowed to make up your own mind. Frank Herbert doesn't hold your fucking hand through it. He allows you to, like, reach your own conclusions about what's morally defensible and everything. When Chani's just like, oh, Paul's the bad guy. Oh, Paul's the bad guy, everybody. You know what that does? That robs it of moral complexity. And it's like, it's so fucking stupid. And it's just mind-boggling. Like, all the ingredients for a great, wonderful movie were there. I don't even know if Denis Villeneuve was, like, trying to make Chani a stronger female character or what. And I don't want to put that in his mind if that's not the intention. If the intention is just to create more conflict, you know, then whatever. There doesn't need to be more conflict, because the amount of conflict, and again, the key conflict, is between the Harkonnens and the Atreides, at least for Book 1. And if you want to make a Children of Dune, a God Emperor of Dune, by all means, be my fucking guest. But for Dune, the resonance of Dune Messiah is only possible with the audience if you finish the first Dune thinking, wow, Paul's achieved total victory. Where can it go from here? Oh, wow, it's a bloody jihad. But you only think about that by Dune Messiah. By Dune, you're supposed to have fun. It's supposed to be fun. You know, like the David Lynch movie that everyone shits on for no fucking reason, even though it's way better. Princess Irulan's way cooler. All the characters are way cooler and more complex. Basically, it's like this. This is what I would compare it to, right? In Lord of the Rings, the reason everyone likes the Lord of the Rings trilogy is because even though Peter Jackson cuts out some story beats like The Scouring of the Shire and Tom Bombadil, it still retains the essential theme of, like, love and friendship and perseverance against this all-consuming evil, and it's great because of that, right? Because Tolkien is such a good fucking writer that if you change the themes of Lord of the Rings, it doesn't work anymore, because you have to actually adapt these books in a respectful way that's, like, accurate to the source material. That's why it's such a good fucking trilogy, because the characters are the same, like, the movie's the same story. It changes, like, subtle things here and there, but these are aesthetic changes. They're not thematic changes. The themes are the same. And by that same token, the original Dune movie by David Lynch is a wonderful, wonderful fucking adaptation. It changes a lot of things. David Lynch makes a lot of interesting choices, but at the end of the day, they're choices that don't change the themes, like the core thematic components of Dune. Like the nipple milking machine, right, that the Baron uses. That's not in the book. But it doesn't matter, because it's just meant to show that the Baron is a sadist, and it's a really cool, interesting, practical effect that David Lynch uses in his own weird way to show that the Baron is a sadist. And can I imagine this Baron using that nipple-milking machine? Yeah, probably. I'm sure the Harkonnens have all kinds of weird fucking devices at their disposal. And the same goes for, you know, Sting as Feyd-Rautha. Oh, he's in a Speedo. Oh, he looks so stupid. No, he looks fucking cool. Can I imagine this Feyd-Rautha in a Speedo? Yeah, probably. He's Feyd-fucking-Rautha. They're the same character. And the reason that the Harkonnens are the best characters in both of the Denis Villeneuve movies is because there aren't that many alterations made to them on a fundamental level. There's still these these conniving bastards, and that's what makes them great characters. That's what makes them so fucking effective, because there aren't that many alterations made to them. Like when people shit on, Sting in the Speedo, or like the nipple milking machine or whatever, it's like, that's just stupid, because these are only aesthetic alterations. They aren't thematic alterations. They don't fundamentally change what the fucking story is about. Going back to Lord of the Rings, the reason it works is because the characters feel like they do in the book. They're all like they are in the book, right? But what Denis Villeneuve's done with Chani, not only, making her like a more prominent figure or whatever, while simultaneously vilifying a strong female character in Jessica, minimizing the role of yet another strong female character in the role of Lady Finring, and then entirely removing like the strongest female character in the form of Aaliyah, all he's doing is ruining the fucking theme of the book. And you can tell that because the end of Dune, the last line is, history will know us as wives. We're called concubines now, but history, right, will know us as wives. And it's almost like Frank Herbert's trying to say something with that final line, because, the end of the last line of a novel is usually like a sort of thesis statement about what the novel's about. Like how at the end of Lord of the Rings, Sam comes home and he's like, well, I'm home. And that's like supposed to be, wow, the story's done. He's finally home from his voyage in Middle-earth, right? Same with Dune. Except what Frank Herbert is saying, I realize this, is like, even though, Paul and Leto II, Leto I, and all these male characters might seem important, the story that's going on, right, actually they're not that important. They just fight and battle and shit, and that's why Frank Herbert made the Bene Gesserit, because they're actually the important characters who actually pull the strings behind everything. So it's almost like, get this, it's almost like Frank Herbert is saying something about how women are actually secretly more powerful and capable and capable of like cutting the trajectory of the fucking universe than men are. It's almost like that's a statement that Frank Herbert was trying to say by having that be the last line in the fucking book. But now because Chani and Jessica aren't friends, and like fucking, Paul and Chani aren't even in love anymore, it doesn't even fucking work. So instead, the last line is just, oh, the holy war begins, as if that's not, like, obvious. But again, there's no subtlety in this movie. So it's basically like if at the end of Lord of the Rings, instead of just minor aesthetic alterations, there's a thematic alteration, where Sam is like, oh, Master Frodo, I can't put up with this shit no more. Fuck you. And gives Frodo a middle finger and just leaves him to die out on the plains of Mordor. It's that big a fucking mistake. It's that big a shit alteration that just fucks the entire story around and ruins it thematically. So yeah, I guess upon watching it a second time, I would raise Dune Part 2 by half a fucking point. I will give it that much credit, but no more than that, because what it has done with Chani is like unforgivable. It's complete, total annihilation of the themes of the story, which is the important part that actually matters, and like what Frank Herbert was actually trying to say. This is lame. And I saw the second time around too that Brian Herbert's like a executive producer or whatever on it. Like, if you don't approve of Sandworms of Doom and all those like fake sequel books that Brian Herbert wrote, why the fuck do you support like this? Like, support the Dune movie that came out while Frank Herbert was still alive. Maybe he wasn't a big fan of the David Lynch one, but at least it was like fucking good and like actually fun. And I would give that one a 10 out of 10 any fucking day of the week. It's awesome. It's a perfect sci-fi film. It's really interesting to be able to form an unpopular opinion in real time, because I just know, like, all the puff pieces, all the reviews are going, wow, Denis Villeneuve done it again, wow, oh wow, this is such a great adaptation of Dune, so much better than David Lynch version, from people who've never seen the David Lynch version. But, like, no, the David Lynch version is, like, the better adaptation, both aesthetically and thematically. The characters feel like they do in the book, the story makes sense, and it looks fucking fantastic. Like, the special effects in that thing are way, way cooler than whatever CGI shit is in this, because, it's in the fucking 80s, and it's like, wow, David Lynch is actually ahead of the fucking curve. That shit still looks futuristic. I don't even know how some of that shit's pulled off. But, yeah. So I would give this like half a point more. I'll probably eventually make a review of the original Dune once I rewatch that. Then I might review the sci-fi series. But yeah, this is just like a disappointing film. And it amazes me that people are like, oh wow, it's so good. Oh, Denis Villeneuve, wow. He really did this character's justice by fucking completely destroying their dynamic for no fucking reason. So yeah, anyway, that's my assessment of Dune Part 2 upon a rewatch. I probably shouldn't have watched this twice in theaters. I mean, it doesn't deserve my money twice, but it's impressive, I guess. It's an impressive movie. Better than the new Star Wars. That's not that high a bar to clear, considering that, like, anything would be better than those, and also Dune has always been better than Star Wars, because, like, Star Wars took so much influence from it and all. Dune is, like, really fucking good if you read the book. And I would just recommend everyone read the book. And watch the David Lynch version. Really good. Kyle MacLachlan's freaking Patrick Stewart and Virginia Madsen. Holy crow. Original Princess Irulan, what a freaking cool character. Way cooler female character than Chani. I like the floating head in the void, please, telling me about how the spice is vital. I want that shit out of my sci-fi movie. I want a sci-fi movie with cool shit, like Princess Irulan. Anyway, that's all I had to say about my rewatch of Dune Part 2. Yeah, 7 out of 10, but I would recommend you watch it. It's a fun cinematic spectacle. It just doesn't carry the ideological weight of the book, and it's not a good adaptation of the second part at all. It cuts out Thufir, it cuts out most of the Finring stuff, and it paints Jessica in a weirdly negative light, and then like tries to make Chani like cooler or something, and just like makes it suck. And there's no Aaliyah, and it's just like a lame KFC-ified version of what the first movie achieved so well. The first movie, I thought, wow, you know, this is actually good. And here it's just like, it's kind of losing it for me. I might go see Dune Messiah when it comes out, but I will always prefer the 84 Dune. Like, nobody can convince me otherwise. That movie's fucking awesome. Kyle MacLachlan, Virginia Madsen, Kenneth McMillan, Patrick Stewart. Awesome fucking cast, brings the heat. Like, even if you're a hardcore Frank Herbert fan, you love the book, you don't think David Lynch adapted the book totally accurately, neither does Denis Villeneuve. He's just better at, like, bullshitting you into thinking that he does adapt the book accurately when he clearly does not. And also is not as talented a director, I hate to say, is not as good a director as David fucking Lynch. Like, it's just not gonna happen. So, watch Dune. It's one of the best science fiction movies ever made, the fucking 84 version, and it deserves way more credit, you know, because David Lynch did it before Denis did. He latched onto this cool property and realized that it was going to be successful. I don't know why the fuck David Lynch disowns his Dune. It's awesome and great and cool, and you get Virginia Madsen as a floating head in the beginning, and it's way cooler than the Princess Irulan here, so... You know, don't go into this expecting a great Princess Irulan or a great Lady Finring, because it does both of those characters totally wrong. It's really lame. I was very disappointed by Dune Part 2, and I just kind of hope the Dune franchise kind of inspires more creative sci-fi going forward, and people, like, get some ideas from it. Maybe make some rip-offs that are maybe better than it, or, like, you know, just have some shit with alien worms or something. You know, cool shit. I do think that it can make people more creative to watch something like Dune. Would I recommend you read the book? Yeah, absolutely, and watch the 84 movie. And, I mean, you can watch all of it, but, you know, just be a discerning Dune consumer, you know. Have standards, is all I mean to say. If something isn't good, you should be honest with yourself. So anyway, yeah, that's my review of Dune Part 2. It was kind of disappointing. Until the next time, I've been Nick Cicada, your roving movie reporter, saying that fear is the mind killer, fear is the little death that brings total obliteration, and so on, yada yada. That's it for me. Spadash.